Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site is Dr. Merav Ozair, global leading emerging technologies expert, Jason Albert, global chief privacy officer at ADP, and Michael Kurzer, partner at the technology, transactions, and intellectual property group at Vinson Elkins. They join me to discuss the EU AI Act, the world's first regulation on artificial intelligence, and how multinationals can adapt and remain in compliance. It is great to have everyone back on the panel. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you for having us.
You got it. And let's talk about, Michael, let's kick it off. How is AI currently being regulated as we know it?
Well, in the U.S., we have some states like Maryland, and we have some cities like New York City and Portland, Oregon, which have put in place some, starting AI regulation. But we don't have a comprehensive AI regulation or law in the United States. And so in Europe, they're moving straight ahead with that, and they expect this year they will have a comprehensive AI law in place, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Jason, is it because the states are expected to regulate it unilaterally, or are they looking for a comprehensive US-EU policy?
I think what you end up with in the US is because it's so challenging to adopt laws at the federal level that the states are moving ahead. We have some things from the government that are voluntary, like the National Institute for Standards and Technology has done its AI risk management framework that really is meant to be comprehensive, but it's much more of a self-regulatory framework than something like what the EU's done, which is sort of top-down regulation.
Right. So, Merav, how is it that the EU has multiple countries in it, just like the US has multiple states in it? How is it different? How were they able to enact this?
Well, the main difference is that the EU, they're already organized as one. There's one EU that already incorporates, that it represents all the countries. We don't have anything like that, other than the White House, or the Congress that represent us all. And we don't have and that the one that is not doing what the EU is doing.
Right.
So it's not about the countries, it's about the government itself that has to do that.
So has it been proven to be effective or enforceable at this point?
The EU?
Yeah.
Well, it has a lot of promise. I don't know yet. I mean, I think that even the EU itself, in a lot of places in the act itself, they will say that they will figure it out. I mean, there are things, they also have like about 18 months to really come up with the right policies and the guidance, and because things are not clear. I mean, even when they have these layers of risk, the minimal, limited, high, and unacceptable, which one it is? I mean, they didn't define, okay, these, services are not, and these are falling into this. I think it will take time to figure it out. I mean, where do you fall? What do you require to do? Am I limited, or am I high, or am I,
And that's what part of the problem is, Jason. There's no standardization, and it can be very subjective when it comes to it. So what are some of the key aspects in the EU AI Act that are at least discernible at this point?
Well, I think the thing that's most discernible is really how they treat, so-called high-risk things that impact access to employment, that impact access to credit, that involve usage of biometrics. And in those cases, you have to really have an end-to-end risk management system and think for your product development. From data quality, are you using good quality data at the outset? Have you done risk management to take account of the risks? Have you tested it for bias in the development? Have you tested it for accuracy to make sure that it actually functions as intended? To when you put it on the market, to post-market monitoring, is it working as intended? Are the results drifting? Is some sort of bias or other issue becoming apparent that you need to address? So it's really an end-to-end life cycle approach for product and service development that involves AI. By the way, whether the AI is embedded in some sort of physical product like a self-driving car, or whether it's a standalone software AI system.
Yeah. And Jason, I would say you have some of the same principles that we're looking at in the U.S. You have Biden putting out the White House's blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, and they're looking at the same risk-based
the bias discrimination, the development, the entire cycle of end-to-end, from the development to the deployment, and I think there's an agreement between the UK and the US for this safety guardrails that they're going to put together, which also looks at development and deployment, so the entire cycle.
But Jill, I think you make a really important point. When we think about it as U.S. and the EU, or even within the U.S. as states and localities begin to enact legislation, it's important to achieve sort of a common framework. We can each reflect it in our legal systems, but for products and services that could be offered on a global basis, we really can't have different rules that are in conflict. So it's going to be important as these develop, whether they're self-regulatory frameworks, whether they're top-down laws, to have common approaches that allow companies to be able to develop products and put them on the market globally.
I mean, I'm all about, I think that I mentioned that all, before when I was here in November, that I humbly believe that, there should be a standardization, globally, because all these companies are multinational. I mean, technology doesn't know borders. It's everywhere. I mean, Mistral is, partnering with Microsoft, and DeepMind is part of Google, and it's kind of a mix. So where do you put, I'm just, going to move the border, and now I'm going to use this standards. I mean, it's very...
Right. So Michael, finish your thought from before.
Well, so what I think is that to draw an analogy to data privacy and security, and with the GDPR and the various state laws that you have in the United States, what ends up happening, I think, in order to comply, and our esteemed colleagues here from ADP, companies have to look globally to figure out how they're going to comply. And if one law in Europe requires a higher standard than what's on the books in the US, then companies will have to adjust and comply. And this is the same thing might be if you're looking at various state laws in the US. If one of those laws is more restrictive, then that may be what sort of sets the bar for
So we were talking about before New York 144.
Right.
Yes, New York 144, which is focused on decision making in employment and hiring. If you're using an automated tool that may have some bias in selecting candidates, then you have to audit that tool and publish those results on your website. It's a very focused, specific law.
And you also have to give certain candidates the ability to opt out from the use of AI, right?
They can
consent, an important part of.
Am I willing or not? So you can't force them.
So when you think about a multinational, I mean, think about it, a lot of global companies are US domiciled, and we don't have this framework in place yet. Well, if you want to do business in the EU or other parts of the world, you have to be able to comply to local.
Absolutely, right? We see that as was mentioned with respect to GDPR and other privacy laws. But the thing is, what the EU AI Act requires is going to be simply good AI risk management governance, right? Again, we see from the NIST AI risk management framework and other similar frameworks that it's really about evaluating AI risk, both compliance with existing laws that apply just as AI is used, just as they apply in non-AI environments, but also taking account of the ethical and societal risks that are posed by AI usage, making sure that even as we realize the benefits of AI, and AI can provide lots of benefits, it can help reduce bias, it can provide insights and predictions. We've all seen the amazing efficiencies that we get with ChatGPT and similar large language models, but to take account of those risks. So I don't think that the EU AI Act is going to impose this huge burden, because I think companies who are developing these types of products and services are going to be doing that type of risk management anyway. They're going to want to have good quality data. They're going to want to have recommendations that are valid. They're going to want to be accurate. They're going to want to avoid bias because of existing laws and because it's the right thing to do.
Right, so Merav, it sounds like the EU AI Act, they want to enforce transparency.
Yeah.
That's what
right, but I mean, to Jason and Michael's point, the EU AI Act is asking for, risk management, but it's not that the UK is not asking for risk management. Maybe it's not in an act, but they are asking for it. I mean, the US is asking for it. Every country is asking for it. So it's not like, they are, but they just put it in an act, an official act that you have to follow. Others, that are just guidelines. So that's the only difference. But so companies will have to abide to that because it is something that every country, every state, every association, everywhere, every organization is asking for, because it has to be.
And customers as well. It's going
exactly.
to be a business.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, but there's something that I like about the EU AI Act, which they talk about systemic risk, which is something that nowhere else it is done. But I think there is a point to when they're saying that. A while ago, Gensler, he mentioned something that if everyone is using the same models, I'm talking about the foundation models, then we might, and it has a point in that it might lead to some kind of systemic risk. So, and I mean, I like it that they put a note on that, and they're asking for, when it comes to foundation models, to really assess that risk, because it is a risk.
Right, but that is what everyone's asking for in terms of having a framework around it, whether we're talking about digital assets, whether we're talking about data privacy, whether we're talking about AI or whatever the next iteration of technology is going to be, is just to provide some sort of framework. You're almost operating in a vacuum and trying to regulate via enforcement, and it's just very unclear. Yes,
yeah, I think you have in the U.S. these sort of very specific laws that get at employment or hiring. And in Europe, you have more of a broad brushstroke. What are the systematic risks you need to be concerned about? And so it's more, I think, open-ended, and that gives some people more concern. But on the other hand, I think Jason's right. They should already be evaluating those risks even outside of the context of this new law. I think it gives maybe some people a little heartburn trying to figure out what are the, where do I fall on the continuum of the risks? Is it at one level it might be self-driving car, and at another level it might be just
writing an email.
Right, writing an email or responding to a chat request or something along those lines, and so everyone sort of has to figure out where whatever they're doing, where does it fall on the spectrum of the regulation by
like
risk.
The critical infrastructure versus your analogy before, if Netflix gives me the wrong recommendation, I'm going to wake up in the morning. But if my automated car or train goes off the rails, the outcome might not be as easy.
Right. And the EU, I think, does a nice job of this in defining sort of high risk, right? You were talking about employment. It's not everything in the employment space, right? It's things about recruiting, about hiring, about work assignment, about termination, because there are lots of things in the employment space that are fully beneficial and low risk, like helping me write a better resume by identifying more skills, giving me training paths to my next opportunity, right? Defining a career path. So I think they've done a nice job on this. I agree. People are going to have to figure out where they fit in and where they don't on that. And I think we're also going to see in certain sectors, the EU AI Act supplemented with standards. But this is something we all have to figure out. We're at the dawn of this age of AI. It poses new and novel risks that we all have to think about how we address as a society, right? Because ultimately, what we're seeing, whether it's through these voluntary frameworks, whether it's through the EU AI Act, is that as always, it's society that determines how we use technology. Technology isn't this inexorable force, and we all have a responsibility to use it responsibly.
Yeah, technology is a tool. I mean, I mentioned that many times. I mean, it's a tool like any other tool. It depends on us humans how we decide to use it. We can use it and for good, can use it for evil. So, and it depends. But the tool itself, also has to function right. Because if you buy a car and the car has some malfunction, then you might get an accident, and you didn't mean to get into an accident. But another point that I wanted to mention is that there are some services or tools that are kind of on a gray area. It's hard to decide, are they good, are they bad, what is the risk? And one example is a companion AI. So in most cases they say, it's great, I mean, people feel like, they have some friend or and even more than a friend that they can talk to. But in some cases, and maybe they are not, in terms of percentage, they are very, 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 small percentage, but still a risk. There's one that commits suicide because, he got this kind of affirmation from the child, that he eventually commits suicide. And there's another incident that there was a person also, got, the feedback and the affirmation from that chatbot that he tried to assassinate the Queen of England. So there are crazy cases, that extreme. Is that a risk type of service or not?
Well, it's almost like you have a knife. It doesn't mean that the knife is actually doing the deed.
Yeah.
But I think actually, to answer your question, I think as we see legislation going forward, I think we're seeing a lot around sort of dark patterns and the ability to influence people that is really being defined as high risk and may even fit in the EU AI Act in sort of the prohibited category.
That's what I'm thinking.
Of things. And again, sort of are you trying to drive action, or are you offering some insight that helps people? AI is at its best when it makes predictions using large amounts of data that, when combined with human judgment, lead to better decisions. And that's why sort of human oversight and human in the loop is so important. And the EU AI Act embodies that, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework embodies that, and that's going to be essential. It's going to be a partnership. It's not going to be fully automated, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds to me right now the proven use case is operational efficiency and kind of getting a jump off on larger projects versus being the answer for everything.
Right. Yeah. I think again, I agree. AI is a tool. There are other tools out there. There are regulations that govern the use of tools. There are regulations that you have to abide by regardless of the tool that you're using. And I think, just again, I come back to the data privacy and security analogy. I think there are risks surrounding the use and collection of data, and there are risks surrounding how you use a tool like AI, and you can use them for good or you can use them for evil.
Jason, from a corporate perspective, which function would be responsible for this? Does this fall under the risk manager? Do you bring in a whole new team of governance AI experts? Who's going to be the one who's responsible for this?
I think it has to be a cross-organizational approach. I think there are a lot of people who play a role. I think certainly legal plays a role in terms of basic compliance. I think privacy plays a role because data is the lifeblood of AI, and so there's lots of concerns around and controls of personal data. I think security plays a role because of cybersecurity, avoiding prompt injection attacks and other things that can cause AI to malfunction. I think because of the importance of data governance, somebody like a chief data officer has got to be really involved and important to make sure from a technological perspective that you really understand what data is powering it and how the model works, and being able to understand that aspect. So when you look across transparency, when you look across security, when you look across privacy, when you look across accuracy, when you look across testing for bias, it's really a village of all of these functions together, each with their expertise that help you assess and comply end to end, again, in a life cycle approach.
Yeah, to your point, it's a holistic approach. I mean, it's everything. It's not just the tech, which is the code. We do have to make sure that the code is okay, and how it is trained, and how the model and everything, which is there are some vulnerabilities in the code itself that can lead to risk. So that could be that. I mean, other than the other things that you just mentioned. So it has to be an holistic approach that everyone has to work together. From the business perspective to the technology to the legal and everything, and cohesively, then we have to say, okay, this tool or whatever, this service is really has we believe to some degree, or at a high probability that it has low risk. I mean,
and Michael, final thoughts are certainly something that can't be operated in silos.
Yeah, so I think just to pick up on Merav's point on the so I think you can look at AI as being a tool, and it's a tool that's been around for a long time. Now is sort of taking center stage, and I think the regulation that you're seeing for it now is not different than the types of regulations that we've seen in the past for the same information that's being looked at in AI, whether it's employment decisions, whether it's self-driving cars or emails or whatever it might be. These are regulations, a risk-based approach in regulations, been around for a long time. AI is just adding one more layer to that. So I think what I would say is people don't need to be afraid of the fact that they're now adding AI into the mix of analyzing the risks they need to be concerned about in their business.
All right, we'll leave it on a positive note. Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.